Kim Benton. I'm a board member of the Nashville Historical Foundation. It's our organization. I always try to do this. We're in partnership with the Metro Nashville Historical Commission. And we exist to support their historic preservation projects and community education. And our big thing is something called Nashville Sites, which is a fabulous program that most of you, I hope you know about. Last year, and our fearless leader, Jill Niece, is not here tonight and sends her regards. Last year, we decided to have a series of lectures, short lectures, in honor of Ann Roberts, the wonderful leader. Where's Ann? She's up there. Okay, Ann, right there. Okay, let's give a round of applause. She won the AIA Tennessee Samuel Morgan Award for Lifetime Achievement, which is the highest honor that the architects group in Tennessee can give to someone who is not an architect, and she received that award last year. She's probably not wearing a medal. Do you wear it tonight? Okay, so anyway, we had that lecture series last year. It's on mid-century architecture. This year, we're focusing on women. So we had our first lecture was 2 weeks ago. It was Dimitri Kaladimos, as she talked about women in television broadcast. It was fabulous. And Jim Ugler spoke last week about women in art. And before I introduce Sandra, I just want to mention our organization is a fundraising group. Okay, so thank you for contributing to this tonight. Thank you very much. If you're interested in getting involved in preservation, you may know that there's a new organization. It's a combination of Historic Nashville and what was the Preservation Society of Nashville. They have wisely decided to join forces and form a group called Preserve Nashville. Wonderful. So I urge everybody in this room, look that up and please join, because membership needs to grow. Because the stronger that group is, when that group comes out opposing something that's stupid or some demolition project ridiculous, we have some power. Obviously, we need that political power. Okay, so tonight we have Sandra Shelton. Sandra's a longtime resident of Nashville. She attended Hillsboro High School. She got a Bachelor of Art degree of Arts in Art History from Vanderbilt University. As many of you know, she opened a store called Pangaea. In 2019, she retired from the store. And I've only known one other person who knows as much, and not being a trained architect, that knows as much about historic buildings. The only person I know like that is Christine Craven, who wrote for the Nashville Senate for many years. She just knew everything. She didn't know everything. I felt Thomas said they should probably in that category. But Sandra's interest in mid-century architecture last year was amazing. So today, she's going to talk about women in print. So please welcome Sandra Shelton.
Then I'm going to start out thanking everybody that helps with this. Everybody in my board, if you're on board, raise your hand. Yep. And then the people that, and then I got friends here at the church who helped, Ann Carr in the back, and Nancy, oh gosh, Morris also helped us with this location. And then there was everybody from the paper that I've known for years. My friend Ann Kane, my new friend Beverly Barnett, Nancy Rhoda, Pat Casey Daly, her husband Bill Stever, and Tommy Goldsmith, his wife Renee, who couldn't be here tonight, John Bridges, who's a lady now, Gloria Ballard, Tam Gordon. I've talked with so many people, Mary Cants. Anyway, you'll hear something about them. And this is going to be long, so if you need to get up and leave at 5:30, you will not hurt my feelings. And please excuse errors in facts or pronunciation. I'm going to try to go through this sort of chronologically. And I grew up reading my favorite copies of the Tennessee and the Banner. and I still subscribe to both, along with others of opinions. Now, like many other people, I love doing research and spend a lot of time on newspapers.com. I kept seeing bylines about women. I wanted to know more about them. The field was dominated by men for years in Nashville. There were a few women who obtained jobs in the early 20th century, usually as feature writers. But there were exceptions, and as the century progressed, more women entered the profession. Many were friends of mine. Right. I'd like to talk about Ida B. Wells, a journalist in Memphis. She was born and enslaved on a plantation near Cold Springs, Mississippi. Wells lost her parents and a brother in the yellow fever epidemic. She eventually moved to Memphis with two sisters, where she taught school and attended summer sessions at Fisk University, so an equal connection. Wells became increasingly active as a journalist and writer. She was dismissed from teaching due to articles criticizing the conditions in the black schools in the region. Ida was one of the first black women to work as an investigative journalist.
Hey, Sandra, I'm going to interrupt. I'll briefly interrupt and say, because she's having trouble hearing you. Do we have a microphone set up here? I don't see it. Yeah, this is the one. Okay, so you just got to talk a little loud.
Okay. Anyway, in 1892, her anti-lynching articles in the Free Speech and Headlight, a black newspaper where she was editor and owner, resulted in a white mob ransacking the office and destroying the building. The mob was incited by Edward Carmack's editorials in the Memphis Commercial. Carmack would later become editor of the Nashville Tennessean. In 1908, he was killed by a rival near the Capitol. A statue of him was erected on the Capitol grounds. Ironic that that statue was torn down by George Floyd protesters in a A friend asked me if I'd ever heard of Will Allen Drumgoole. I did not. Born in 1860 in Murfreesboro, she graduated from the Clarksville Female Academy and the New England School of Expression. She began writing in 1884, and she studied law with her father. However, women were not allowed to practice law in Tennessee until 1907. She was a clerk in the Senate from 1885 and 1887, but was later defeated and went to Texas, like so many other Mississippians. There she taught, wrote for newspapers, and founded the Waco Women's Press Club. When she returned to Nashville, she spent time frequently at a cabin in Estelle Springs, bought with her first earnings. She enjoyed hunting, fishing, and riding. Drumgoole began writing for the Banner in 1900, was hired as a permanent staff member in 1902, and in 1903 began her popular column, Song and Story, which continued for 31 years. Shortly after U.S. entered World War I, in 1917, she joined the U.S. Navy as a yeoman warrant officer, perhaps the first woman to serve in that capacity. Her columns continued, and in 1922, Miss Will, as she was called, was named literary editor. Though her columns were essentially poems and stories, she made her living at the Banner and was a fascinating character. Anne Portfield Rankin joined the staff of the Tennessean in 1918. Well, dates. She lived for a time in a large attic studio on 4th Avenue, which became a gathering place for writers and artists. Among the first women in the nation to have her name carried on a masthead of a newspaper. She wrote a daily column called The Rain Pool, and she was movie critic for the paper. She went to Knoxville to become a staff member of the Knoxville Journal, returning in 1936, and became connected with the WPA Writers Project and was writing her memoirs when she was 7. Mary Stonda Douglas wrote for the Banner 2 different times. I wondered how she got the job. She was first a reporter and drama critic, later feature editor and book page editor. She talked to the girls at Hillsboro School on the appeal of the newspaper profession as an opportunity to meet all kinds of men and women, from criminals to great writers and civic leaders. The feature writers had the designated class of work, according to her. She stressed a good education, especially in literature and history, as essential, and added that women are naturally qualified by their great curiosity, accuracy, and sympathy. One of the most prominent women in her time, she was named Woman of the Year in 1953 of the Davidson County Business and Professional Women's Club. And in 1919, she was the first woman in Nashville to fly in an airplane. Here she is at Hampton Field, right off of Hillsboro Road. Christine Sadler was born in Silver Point, Tennessee, and graduated from Peabody College. After teaching several places, she joined the staff at the Banner in 1930. She had experience on most of the city beats, which was best known for feature writing, theater, and art reviews. For a time, she wrote a column called The Reporter's Notebook. Sadler wrote a series of articles about Nashville women in business. One was about the two women who founded Satsuma, and I used that for my earlier talks. Sadler lived at the YWCA Annex, and then at the Spartan on 21st Avenue South, which is now gone. She reported on many stories, including a visit by Frances Perkins, Labor Secretary, the first woman cabinet. She left the Banner and received her master's degree in journalism at Columbia University in 1937. She then became a reporter, National News Bureau staffer, and Sunday editor for the Washington Post. She was the first woman to cover a national political convention for the Post. She then became Washington, D.C. editor of McCall's Magazine. That was 1944 until retiring in 1971. She covered the White House for both the Post and McCall's and wrote two related books, America's First Ladies and Children in the White House. Margaret Hensley Warden grew up in an aunt's house adjacent to what's now Belmont University. She graduated from Ward Belmont and Peabody College. Luke Lee's wife was her first cousin. He was the publisher of the Tennessean, and in 1925 let her write a weekly column about horses. And was hiatus for a European trip and a stint working in a bookstore. She returned to the Tennessean in 1939 and wrote her weekly Horse Sense column until she retired at age 90. She founded the Middle Tennessee Pony Club in 1953, one of the first in the United States. She started raising ponies herself on friends' farms in the late 50s. I found a feature story that she wrote for the Tennessee and Sunday magazine in 1951 on Ben Allen, for whom the road is named. He and his wife held regular meetings in their home on 8th Avenue South to communicate with a spirit called the Thing. Warden also wrote other articles about history. In 1987, after years of pressure from Belmont College to sell her home, she worked a deal for $100,000, plus the school had to build her a house the same size and shape as her old home right next door. And the one they built on the right. They also had to move a few trees and her two chickens, Tosca and Carmen, and my friend Mark Brown took care of when she traveled. Besides horses, Warren loved opera and historic preservation. She also collected art. Warren died at home at the age of 103, and I got a lot of information from the book Miss Warden wrote, Life Has Been Very Kind to Me, and from art. Okay, Nellie Kenyon, the 5-foot-tall dynamo, a legendary figure in Tennessee journalism. She was born in Louisville, moved with her parents to Chattanooga at an early age. She graduated from Chattanooga Central High School. She took classes at the University of Chattanooga and Peabody College. Her mother was society editor for the Old Chattanooga News, and Nellie started working at the paper while still in school. When she completed her education, she became a full-time reporter. Another woman who loved to fly. She had a weekly column about aviation. Kenyon had an amazing career on Chattanooga. She was the first reporter to interview Harry Vernon's mother, Bev Vernon, the mother who saved suffrage. The letter Bev wrote to her son led him to change his vote to yes, and history was made. In the summer of 1922, Kenyon attended and reported on a Ku Klux Klan meeting in Rossville, Georgia. In 1925, she was the only woman sent by her paper to Dayton, Tennessee to cover the lead up to the scope strike. When she first entered the Ray County courthouse, she saw the courtroom was in poor condition. She suggested to the judge that he arrange for the bailiffs. And like other people she encountered over her career, he couldn't say no. He kept the papers down. While there, Kenyon interviewed ordinary folks as well as the major players. She even took H.L. Mencken to a Holy Roller meeting. In 1931, Kenyon tracked down the man who robbed a branch of the Hamilton National Bank and won Best Reporter Detective on magazine. It brought $1,000 and a trip to New York City to receive the award from the First Lady of New York, Eleanor Roosevelt. In 1940, after ownership of the Chattanooga paper changed, Kenyon moved to Nashville and joined the staff of the Nashville Tennessean. She lived first in an apartment on 18th Avenue South, then in the home of Francis Jones on Richland Avenue. Always busy and dedicated, Kenyon covered too many stories to list. But here are some of the highlights. In 1950, the Baby Memphis. Georgia Tan, head of the Tennessee Children's Home Society there, had been selling babies for profit. In 1956, Kenyon covered the state Supreme Court ruling to uphold desegregation. In 1957, she began working the Bengal beef. In 1962, she got the scoop that Jimmy Hoffa's trial would be held in Nashville. She had checked the labels of the overcoats of the witnesses that were scheduled to appear. When she saw a letter from Detroit, she knew they would not testify by trial. Kenyon was the only woman covering the trial. She witnessed the attempt on Hoffa's life and reported on it. The result after 9 weeks was a mistrial as the jury was hopelessly deadlocked. Kenyon was nominated for a National Headliner Award, and Judge Miller praised her reporting as accurate, thorough, objective, and readable. In 1963-64, she covered Hoffman's jury tampering trial, was tampering with the jury in Nashville, this time in Chattanooga. Hoffa respected Kenyon for her honest reporting and claimed she was the most persistent woman he'd ever known. This article about her getting JFK's handshake is an example of that persistence. She worked through the Secret Service agencies. Kenyon resided for years at the Blackstone Apartments on West End Avenue. She had a reunion with John Scopes before she retired from the Tennessean in 1970. She died in 1982, and most of what I told you I got from this wonderful book about her about Hollywood waiting. Louise Littleton Davis, born in Paris, Tennessee, attended Washington University, the University of North Carolina, and earned a Master of Arts at Vanderbilt University. She began covering the Tennessee legislature for the Associated Press in 1943. At the close of the session, she joined the staff of the Tennesseans. Davis soon became a feature writer, noted for her careful craftsmanship and warm human interest of her story. She reported for the airport in 1944 and 45 during World War II. And look at how tall she was. Yeah, she then reported from Europe on hands across the sea after the war. Sweet. Davis moved to the Sunday magazine, where she wrote about history and a variety of other subjects. She wrote 2 articles about the women who founded St. Samuel. Just sound like a broken record. Another one of my sources. One about their house on Hart Creek for her series, My Beautiful Ponds, and a second article about their history. Davis wrote several books about the history of the area, including Frontier Tales of Tennessee and Nashville Tales. And I had this book, and the chapter about the women's right to vote and union section I found fascinating. She writes about Pearson, who was the anti-head, and it's a really interesting article. I was surprised. She was elected in '87, Davidson County historian, and served on the Metro Historic Commission. Davis first developed this home on Ashwood Avenue in 1946, not long after starting to write for the Tennessean. It's here that she was living. She passed away in 1995. Louise Lassiter McGuire was born in Nashville. She obtained her master's in art education from Peabody College, married Dr. Virgil McGuire in 1996, and had 4 children. She was an art critic for the Nashville Bar and a regular columnist from 1950 to 1961. She reviewed art and architecture and wrote reviews on books about art. Louise was a founding member of the Nashville Artist Guild. She specialized in portraits and landscapes. She taught studio art and history at MBA 1967-79. She taught at the Nashville Institute for the Arts from 80 to 92. Whoops, I have to come up on it. Skip. Sorry. She wrote articles about Nashville sculptor William Atkinson. One appeared in the Banner in 1954. And another was published in the Smithsonian magazine in 1981. And I found a copy at the library. Yep. She also was art editor for Nashville Life magazine. It was published from 1994 to 1999. Louise also produced documentary films. The first, Sunflower and Knothouse, was about artist Red Grooms. She had written an article about Red, critiquing his work while he was still in high school at Hillsboro. The film was nominated for an Academy Award in 1987. The next film was Louise Oswald, Painted with Light, in 2000. Both films were directed by Thomas Neff of Nashville. In 2005, Louise wrote and illustrated Athena Smiles, a book for children based on the Athena statue in the Parthenon, created by who else? The Aquire's log home in Franklin was filled with Louise's creativity, and in 1978 was featured in an article by her friend, Claire Hieronymus, in the Tennessean. Speaking of, Sarah Booth Wiggins Hieronymus was born in Drew, Mississippi, home of Pop Staples. The family soon moved to Memphis, where her mother died. Claire was just 2 or 3, leaving her father to raise her and her younger sister. They must have moved often, as I read that she attended 16 schools before becoming the youngest student ever to graduate high school in Tulsa, Oklahoma at age 14. She received her degree in business administration at the University of Tulsa at age 18 and actually studied while there. She went on to get a master's in social work from the University of Oklahoma. She later received an honorary doctorate in fine arts from Rhode Island College. Clara married in 1937 and worked as a labor analyst and statistician in Tulsa. She was involved in many charitable organizations and wrote book reviews for the Tulsa Dog. In 1950, Clara moved to Nashville with her husband, Senator. Yes, that was his first name. Clyde Coronis, an officer at their national bank, and the two children. She had always loved acting and writing and had an insatiable interest in the visual arts. Clara found work at the Tennessean as a freelance writer. And from 1956 until her retirement in 97, she was the art and drama critic for the Tennessean. Clara was an influential figure in Tennessee theater and organized regular theater tours to New York City and London. Twice a year for 25 years, she took people to see plays and visit museums. And her visit to the Guggenheim is an interesting article. She was not thrilled with the architect. I sent you a copy of the article. Right? She was a founding member of the American Theater Critics Association in 1974. From 80 to 84, she was the chair, and in 84 was elected executive secretary. There was a time in theaters here when two words uttered backstage made people's blood run cold. Clara Seaver. At the height of her arts coverage, local artists enjoyed renewed support. Events took place at the Parthenon, Cheapwood, Fisk, the Nashville Arts Guild, and small galleries. Clara attended every event possible, staying at work late, typing reviews in time for the morning's paper. In 1970, she wrote a book with Barbara Azar, actress and director in Nashville Theater, Requiem for a Nun, On Stage and Off, tells the progression of Faulkner's book to the stage. Here are some of her design articles. And she sat through the rain in the park for Shakespeare's Park and wrote a review. In honor of her coverage of the design scene and her support of Moore College of Design, a lecture hall there was named for her, and it's still sitting there on campus. Not sure what's going to happen with it. We're Williamson County taking that whole area over. They're preserving most of the buildings. Of course, Clara was on. Here, thanks to John Bridges, is a photo of the team from the Tennessean in 1987. Clara, John, and Hector Garnett. Great picture, John. Of course, she later had a difference of opinion with Captain Garnell paying the 1988 event. Behind the genteel, proper Southern woman was a razor-sharp perception and wit, and obviously very smart. Clara was happily married for 58 years until High's death in 1995. They lived in what I hear was a lovely house at 2200 Hemingway that has since been demolished at her place. You don't know how far I've tried to find a picture of it. I'm still looking. Filled with art in its keys, their home was often featured on home tours, but never pictured in the articles. One article called the house the Burka the name of the mountain in Australia that's also called Ayers Rock. I don't know where that came from. Mystery. Claire passed away at the age of 100 in her son's home in Savannah, Tennessee. And Miss Candy McCampbell, so the oldest of the 8 siblings in the Fountain City section of Knoxville. She earned her degree in 1968 at the University of Tennessee, where she served as editor of the student newspaper. Candy started working at the Tennessean the same year she graduated. In 1971, Candy married J. William Bill Preston, a fellow Tennessean reporter, who also had worked at the UTV. His father was a photographer at the Tennessean from 1949 to 1984. Candy performed many tasks at the paper, including writing features and personal finance stories and editing city and real estate sections. In 1984, she became the Tennessean's first business editor. She said the most memorable story she worked on was the 1982 collapse of a statewide chain of banks owned by the brothers J. and C.H. Butcher. Both were later convicted of fraud. She said the story she was most proud of was helping break the news in 1985 that Saturn would open an auto manufacturing base in Tennessee. After 33 years, Candy retired. She volunteered at the Frist Art Museum and Second Harvest Food Banks until her death in 2025. I don't have to mention Sandra Roberts as I list, but Sandra Roberts came from Humboldt, Tennessee, graduated from the University of Tennessee in Knoxville and earned her library degree at Peabody College. She became an employee of the Tennessean Library in 1974, and in 1976 became chief librarian. She did research on the Butcher banking empire as it crumbled. She worked on the newspaper's investigation into the Leon Frank story. Convicted in Atlanta for a murder he did not commit, Frank was lynched in 1915. In part because of new evidence uncovered by the Tennessean, Frank was pardoned posthumously. In 1981, Roberts became president of the Women's Political Caucus. She is with Barbara Finn, Carlene Waller, and Betty Dixon. After being an editorial writer since 1983, Roberts was named executive editor in 1987. She was the first woman to hold that job. In her new position, she added to the editorial page, the op-ed page, and the perspective section in the Sunday Tennessean. She moderated a couple of Senate debates. She was the bicentennial editor for 1996, the year-long celebration. Of course, we're living through one of those now. And I'm quoting fellow Tennessean staffer, Terry Quillen, who works here at the church. Sandra was the most powerful journalist you might never have heard of. When a member of the president's cabinet or Congress or Ned McWhirter or Bill Bredesen wanted their say on the Tennessean opinion page, they called Sandra. And they, along with just about everybody in the state legislature and on the Metro Council, took Sandra's call from the 1980s to the early 21st century. She was trained firsthand by the iconic John Siegenthaler. She perhaps, as no one else at 1100 Broadway, inherited his influence with her own touch of grace and aplomb. Reaching someone here in the audience. Born in San Francisco, Nancy Bravo graduated from Peabody College with a degree in psychology and art. She then attended the University of Tennessee School of Social Work. She came to the Tennessean in 1974 as the first woman photographer in the paper's history. and the first woman photojournalist in Nashville. At the Tennessean, for emphasis with documentary photo stories depicting social and cultural issues. During her career, Nancy won numerous journalism awards, including a finalist in 1981 for the Pulitzer Prize in Public Service for the series on resurgence of flame. And that photo was one of the photos in that series. Nancy, in 1981, she also received a Nieman Fellowship for journalism at Harvard University.
Sandra, excuse me, did Jerry Johnson manage to infiltrate the Klan?
Yeah, but we're not talking about me. He did, yes. I mentioned him later. In 1982, Nancy wrote and photographed the sisters of the St. Cecilia Convent. In 91, she visited the Southport Housing Project with Bill Williams, who was writing about a place where he spent some of his teenage years. I did not know that. They exposed the dangers of living there. When I was something younger, we were told it's the most dangerous place, housing project to visit in the city, and go there as well as all the rest. In 1992, she covered a story with Ray Waddle on the Pentecostal faith. And in 1995, Nancy went to Vietnam with Trini Crane, who was returning for the first time since escaping at age 3.5. When Nancy retired from the Tennessean, she became photo editor for the book Nashville, An American Self-Portrait. There were other books that she and writer Lorena Wilsey published a book, Home to Us, about 6 families in Tennessee who preserved their land through the Land Trust. She also gave her time to the Tennessee Department of Children's Services, documenting young people caught in the foster care system. Here are a couple of Nancy's photographs that I really love. Next time it's like nice art down. Yes, you in the back can see Nancy putting on her makeup. Gloria Dallard, a Nashville native, graduated from the University of Tennessee, Nashville, with a degree in journalism. While still a student, she was a special correspondent with Tennessee, writing an article about a rooftop garden over DW fixers. Upon graduation, she became a writer, then an editor at the Tennessean. Her pieces were varied the first few years: book reviews, restaurant and club reviews. Here's one on John Hyatt playing for the kids at Children's Hospital. And one on Hugh Hauser that was about handicap awareness. Gloria then became fashion editor. Here she was providing makeovers. Then, as assistant features editor, she had the chance to start a weekly column about photography gardening, eventually called the Garden Club. She wrote and photographed a series of travel articles, some titled Free Danescape. Gloria left the newspaper to become a freelance writer. She led creative writing classes and workshops at Watkins for 10 years. She has written in various ways, and she has been an NTSU Write Mentor since 2010. Gloria is also now a master gardener, still practicing her copy. Beverly Burnett is with us tonight. It's been described to me as the glue that held the Tennessean together, and she's still digging it. She started as a copy clerk to the newsroom, became administrative assistant to the managing editor, Wayne Wilby Witt. That's a plain one to say. She then assisted John Siegenthaler as administrative assistant, Ms. Edna Gardner. My friend Richard Slide described Gardner as intimidating and not to be bothered if it wasn't something very important to the boss. Beverly stepped into the position when Gardner retired and was not that kind of person. Richard said Beverly was his go-to resource for questions regarding city college schedule, the newsroom, and Nashville at large. She's been my resource for some information too. Thank you, Beverly. She has assisted 6 editors since Siegenthaler, including Maria Day Farine, the first and only woman editor so far, 2011 to 2022. For the half century, Beverly has worked at the newspaper. She never got a bottle line, a photo credit, or a listing on the masthead. What she did get was pressure, not just from demanding bosses, but from everyone in the newsroom, from angry subscribers, from community leaders who wanted to thin the editor's ear. In addition to that, she was chief confidant, party organizer, scheduler, and most of all, a loyal friend. Everybody talked to her. Mary Morton Hance,
Right. So,
graduated from the University of the South in Sewanee, Tennessee. In January of 1976, he started as an entry-level copy clerk at the Banner. She covered the police beat. She covered the swords and metro government. Covered a visit from President Richard Nixon. Had dinner with Chubby Checker and interviewed Walker Percy. She went to Washington to cover the Jubilee Singers at Carnegie Hall. I guess y'all realize I can't get the Banner articles because they're not on his not after the early 60s. So, Mary met her husband as a Banner and then married in 1982. Ms. Chitty began in March of 1994, making its debut in the business section. The column developed such a following, it moved to the living section 3 times a week. When the Banner closed in 1998, she was asked to bring Miss Chick to the Tennessean. Mary wrote about simple ways ordinary people make the most of their money. Free things to do, good sales, and creative ways to do more with less. She said in her farewell column, she'd like to think being cheap was an avenue to generosity. Vance was most proud of the Ms. Cheap Penny Drive that benefited Second Harvest Food Bank. In 12 years, it raised over $1.3 million. Mary went on to appear as Ms. Cheap's on News Channel 5's Talk of the Town and is still writing as Ms. Cheap today. Here's her very first column, and one I just saw a couple weeks ago in the Main Street Nashville News. Catherine Darnell. Born in Todd County, Kentucky, she graduated from Austin Peay State University and came to work at the Tennessean. When she arrived there, she was Kathy. She wrote features and covered Capitol Hill until John Siegenthaler told her he wanted her to write a chatty, sometimes catty column covering Nashville's high-profile socialites, politicians, community leaders. He wanted her to attend all the parties that took place in ballrooms and fancy venues, seemingly every Saturday night. Siegenthaler wanted people to recognize her, so he said she should wear a hat. Thus, Kathy became Catherine, and finally, thanks to fellow reporter Jerry Thompson, Cat in the Hat. Her columns made people read the paper again. Love her or hate her, everyone had to read her. In the 1980s and 90s, the social scene was a busy bee with competition from many sources, including Debbie Banner, who came with us from 1989 to 1998, and here the two of them are in an event. The party and Cat in the Hat, as well as Betty Banner, ended in the late 90s. Catherine stayed at the Tennessean as an assistant features editor and occasional gardening columnist until 2002, when she went back to Kentucky. Catherine was married several times. My friend Pat said when she asked her why she decided to stick with the last name of her second husband, she said, "Emily, you have to stop somewhere." Anyway, she passed away in Kentucky in 2016. Tam Gordon is another native Nashvilleian and graduate of the University of Tennessee in Nashville. She started at the Vanderbilt in 1978. She covered the federal courts and agencies, then was a Metro government reporter. Tam reported on some colorful characters, namely Bill Wagner, mayor of Nashville from 1987 to 1991, and Faith Thomas, sheriff from 1970 until his federal conviction in September of 1990. The 1987 mayor's race pitted Bill Wagner against newcomer Bill Bredesen. Bredesen lost, but came back and won in 1991. Tam went on to serve as Bredesen's press secretary during most of his 2 terms as mayor. She then went to the John Siegenthaler Center as projects coordinator. When Bredesen became governor, he appointed Gordon as his special assistant. Gail Kerr wrote of Tim Gordon when Tam left the Banner to become Bredesen's press secretary. Quoting those who were in the stone the death and lunch counter, Tam knows where the bodies are buried. Tam had covered those bodies, their crimes, their elections, their nepotism, and meanderings for 13 years. Tam was the 3rd woman and 1st minority in the press secretary's job since Metro was founded. Her political knowledge was what the untraveled, untested businessman needed. Most of you remember he was a Yankee. Gail McKnight Farrer, another native Nashvilleian, began work as a copy girl in 1978 while she was still in high school. After graduating from Southwestern, now Rhodes College in Memphis, she returned to the Tennessean as a beat reporter. She covered Vanderbilt Bar Alexander, 2nd term. There were other stories during that time, as civility awareness, fire call duty, Metro growth, and a woman running for mayor. She shadowed Bill Clinton and Al Gore during the campaigns for the White House in 92 and 96. More growth. And one of her last columns was about the state legislature stepping into Metro's business. But here's Joe. Gail served as city editor in 1998 before becoming a columnist in 2000. Her columns read Sunday, Monday, and Wednesday. She was regularly the Nashville Scene Readers Poll Best Local Columnist. Bruce Dovey, at one time a competing reporter at the Vanderbilt, but he and Gail became good friends. He wrote a movie tribute to her when she passed away much too soon in 2014. Gail's insight comes from years of covering the people, institutions, and issues that are still so important today. And like a trusted friend, she'll give it to you straight with your interest in mind. Gail said, I love this wonderful place where we live, and anything or anyone that messes with it is fair game. They don't pay me to write about bunnies and kittens. Casey David is from St. Louis, Missouri. She got a BFA in art and theater at Quincy College in Quincy, Illinois. She became a high school teacher, art director for a TV station, and in 1972 became the university photographer at MTSU. After 7 years there, Bill Welch at the Tennessean told us there was a job for a stringer. After 4 years part-time, that became full-time. During her time at the Tennessean, she photographed 4 presidents and spent Christmas with a homeless couple on the Cumberland River bank. She told me she always tried to get people to smile for their portrait photos. I can see that because I've yet to see Pat in a photo or in person when she was outside. She's even smiling at me. She wrote and photographed Al Gore's first days in the Senate and photographed the vision of Jesus on a freezer in Estelle Springs, Tennessee. She photographed ZZ Top and Jimmy Carter. I also know that she climbed up on top of Christ Church Cathedral to get photos of gargoyles. In the brave one. Kate married fellow photographer Bill Stever, and they've made a fun life together. Here in Nashville and now in Murfreesboro, their home is always lit up and decorated to the hilt of the holidays, especially Halloween and Christmas. They travel together frequently, especially to the Mississippi Delta, where Bill plays music and has photographed so many blues musicians old and new. Pat has turned her storytelling from photography to genealogy. She's currently chronicling her family's history. Now, Anne The band has created a glorious retirement by following her passion for music. She sings and plays macro Bettys with a trio called the Furies. You must go hear them if you. Yeah. And Claire, one of her, also into she told me when I was anxiously looking at retirement to make a list of all the things I wanted to do and go out and do them. It was great advice. Anne was not born in Nashville. She was born in Boston. The family moved to England, came back to Boston, then to Michigan, then to Birmingham, and finally came to Nashville in time for Anne to start 8th grade at Innsbruck. She graduated from Paralegal, and after a variety of blue-collar jobs, graduated from Peabody with an English major and a music minor. Anne started part-time with the Tennessean, and after 2 years, took over Karen Shoulder's job, and in general and environmental reporting. This is one of my favorite stories she did. In December 1989, she wrote a series of 4 articles on unhoused alcoholics, even visiting the dry kennel, with photographer Callie Shett, another woman, publisher. It was a great series, and it was at Christmas time. That's perfect. In April of 1993, Anne flew out of Clarksville with the 101st Airborne Division to Germany, then on to Sarajevo during wartime, to drop pallets with food and medical supplies. Anne told me she and photographer Dolores Delvin, another woman photographer journalist, were told to run from the airplane to the nearest cover when they landed. Later, Anne covered a variety of environmental issues. These kind of struck me as interesting for now. Renee Elder Goldsmith was another native who could not be here today. She grew up in Donaldson, but her cousin is here. She interned at the Banner in 1980 and started part-time at the Tennessean in 1981 as a stringer. 2 years later, she completed her education at ATSU with a major in print journalism and a minor in political science. Renee was always interested in stories about children, and that's what happened. In 1984, Renee covered Lamar Alexander's signing of a farm bill for Tennessee's public schools. When she asked him if his children would continue in private schools, he said yes. Renee told me that was the only time she's ever been yelled at by a governor. Renee received an Excellence Award from the Association for Target Citizens in 1987. That same year, she married fellow reporter Connie Goldsmith. As a full-time reporter, Renee covered education, children's education, nonprofits, neighborhood and community issues, and business. And here's an article by her and Amy. Thank you. Kay West grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, the oldest of 5 children. She moved to New York City right after high school graduation and landed a job as a receptionist at Penthouse Magazine. She moved up to become associate editor there before coming to Nashville. She was first a publicist with RCA, then worked for NCA, before deciding writing was what she really wanted to do. Her focus was food, hospitality, the arts, and culture. She became Betty Banner, the society column that had existed at the Banner from 1978 through the 70s, and was then reprised in the 1980s. Kay was Betty Banner for about 10 years, helping to bring the column to Music Row and creating more diversity. In the late 80s, Kay became the restaurant reviewer for the Nashville Scene, a job she held for 15 years. She wrote a scathing article about Maria's restaurant. It was white. Maria would run down collecting all the issues he could find on it and dumping them in the trash. Kay was also national correspondent for People's Magazine for 7 years. On May 19, 2017, the Tennessee House GOP voted against an honorary resolution for her that was proposed by Representative John Ray Clemens. The reason they gave was her stint decades ago at Penthouse. And I'm not going to say it here. If anyone wants to hear his response, okay. And last, the Tennessee Tribune is an African-American newspaper in Nashville, covering the whole state. It's the only statewide newspaper in the United States. It was founded in 1991 by Rosetta Irvin Miller Carey. Miller Carey was born in Pennsylvania, attended Howard University and Princeton Community College before receiving her BS in chemistry from the University of Memphis. Miller Carey started her career by joining the U.S. Navy in 1954, another Navy woman. In 1990, she founded Carey & Carey Associates and started publishing a magazine. A year later, she founded the Tennessee Tribune, saying the black press is the hope for the future. In 2019, she received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Newspaper Publishers Association. Now, I have left out a lot, a whole lot of women, and I hope I haven't made too many mistakes. But I'd like to close with a quote from Frank Sutherland, the Tennessean editor from 1989 to 2004. If you look at the newspaper's advocacy journalism and editorial stances over the years, those efforts change and improve the lives of a wide and diverse community. Nursing home standards were improved, jails were cleaned up, schools were integrated, churches began to work together, mentally ill got services they needed, corrupt politicians were exposed. All of this leading to a better city in which to live. We still need that. America needs journalists.
I got to know Sandra through the Nashville, there's a Nashville History Club group. We meet every Tuesday at the Fort Negley Visitor Center. Gene Mothman, who's here, is the leader of our group. And we meet, and I got to know her there, and she gave a presentation on Hillsboro Village, you know, where her store was. And I remember her telling me she'd never done a presentation like that before. She said she was very nervous about doing it. And I thought, well, you know, let's see how it goes. Well, it was wonderful. And then, of course, last year she did the presentation on mid-century architecture, and the same thing happened. It was wonderful. So this is third one. So I want this room to urge her to keep doing this.
It's a chemical orchid. It is. And Kim said to me not 2 days ago, please don't just preach it. And I said, Kim, that's the only way I can do this.
Okay, well,
so I apologize for not being more.
I think it turned out just fine. But listen, I'm sure there's some questions. We do take some questions from people.
Sure.
I'm going to start with one. Where did you find all of this?
Well, like I said at the beginning, I had help from friends from the newspaper. You know, Ann, Pat, Nancy, Tommy, who know people that aren't here, Sandra Roberts, Ellen Bridges.
Well, yeah.
John Bridges. we had lunch at Ellison Place. It was fabulous. Anyway, lots of people, and newspapers.com, and special collections at the downtown libraries, and the archives.
I just want some other questions, please. Don't let her off the
I'm
hook.
okay if you don't have questions.
In the back?
This is not a question, it's just a comment. Margaret Leslie Morgan was on the very first historical commission, and it's because of Miss Margaret that we had the Archive Awards program. It was her idea.
Okay.
She said that people love to get prizes. She knew that because of the horse shows. And so it started in 1973, and that was Miss Margaret who did it. So
obviously, I
she
didn't
just
talk to
needs to be
Nancy.
right. She was on the commission forever. So you know.
Yeah, and I was at the antique mall this weekend. I had a company. We went to Gasoline, and I found a series of brochures about an art exhibit at Cheapwood, and they listed all the donated pieces, and she had so many that were donated for the show. Yeah, quite a gallon. She was also 5 feet tall, like Nellie Kenyon. And I don't think, I may be wrong, but I don't think Nellie Kenyon, Margaret Lindsay Gordon, or Louise Davis ever drove a car.
Did you?
They would take the bus to the or get a taxi. And I know Aunt Payne gave Morgan rides home from Tennessee.
And we
Yeah.
count with the chair.
Yes.
Tennessee.
Would some of the people that I'm talking about, that you are here, stand up and go to see? Come on, Daddy. Come on. Stand up. Pat, thanks. And John is in the back. He's not one.
John, Bill, and
Yeah, and Bill,
And
Tommy.
so, my first Friday, that is my comment.
Yes, that's it.
You have a comment, and that is that as you're talking, I'm thinking about the Margaret Lindsay Gordon's papers are at MTSU, Louise and Claire Hieronymus are at Vanderbilt. But for those people in the room, you know, that's where historians are going to go in the future to look for things.
I will say, I tried to get Claire's papers at Vanderbilt. They're in the process of re-cataloging them, so I could not look at them. I would have found a picture of that house.
Well, they were really kind of a jumble, because I looked at it.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, they just put everything in boxes.
And Louise's were, actually, I forgot this, were at TSLA. And they gave me complete access to that. They were great. They were great. Lots of pictures.
Louise Davis.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, good. But
And
I'm
then,
just
of course,
saying to those of you in the room who might be wondering what you're gonna do with your, you know, papers, photographs, whatever, give it some thought. It takes some work to get them organized, and we will be so appreciative in the future.
Yeah. And I didn't really know Louise Clark, my mother did. But I know Alan and his sister Nancy. So I talked to Nancy a lot about them. Yes, Dean?
I'm married into the Lindsley family, but I was not allowed to speak with Margaret Lindsley Gordon because her side of the family had supported the union. And my mother-in-law would not let me introduce my children to her. So it was only after my mother-in-law, who was a Lindsay, died, that I invited her to the house, and she came in a taxi.
Yes,
And I heard somebody that the taxi was paid for by the Tennessean. I've got so many children. And again, the people I left out, I just did what I could and what I was familiar with.
Well, let's, one thing, you can see how much research you did. And this woman is a Tennessee treasure. That's a good. Let's give her a round of applause. Let's stick around for questions individually.
Robert Caro, research is great. Writing is hard.
Thanks for coming.